Hi, everyone. My name is Will Kostakis. I'm an author for young adults, and thank you so much for joining us here today. I think it's important that even though we're all in very disparate places, I think it's important that we enjoy with an acknowledgement of country. I'm in Redfern, so I will speak to that. I would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present, and any other members of community who are here today. Thank you so much for joining us. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here and to have Patrick here with us. Patrick and I have a sort of long history. I met him as a 19-year-old when he was promoting The Knife of Never Letting Go at an event at the University of Sydney, and I made a complete ass of myself. And so obviously the universe keeps forcing us back together and forcing me to keep reliving my embarrassing teendom. Yay! But yeah, Patrick, as you all are obviously aware, he is incredibly prolific. While we were chatting before everyone came, I was complaining about having to write 2 books in 2 years, and he just casually mentions he's written, what, 15 and 17?
12
what?
and 17.
12 and 17. Okay, that's not...
And I called you a lightweight.
Yeah, there we go. See, look, he has continued everyone's time-honored tradition of making fun of me, and by all means, feel free to join in. So Patrick has written 2 novels for adults, The Crash of Hennington and The Crane Wife, 1 short story collection for adults, topics about which I know nothing. But I believe he is best known for his young adult novels, and that is what I come to read him for. The Knife of Never Letting Go, The Ask and the Answer, Monsters of Men, A Monster Calls, More Than This, The Rest of Us Just Live Here, Release, and The Ocean Was Our Sky, and Burn. Did I miss any, Patrick? No?
Nope.
Excellent. Okay, great. Now, look, I will start off by saying that I finished Burn a couple of days ago, and it is exquisite, as I have come to expect of your work. And for those of you who are just joining us, there are links in the chat if you would like to pick up a copy from Harry Hartog. And look, when I received the book in the mail, I looked down at the cover, and I'm quite jealous of Patrick's covers, and I thought, you know what, there is no way this book is as good as that cover. And, you know, again, I was proven wrong. For those of you that aren't aware of what it's about, Burn is an all-consuming story of revenge, redemption, and dragons. On a cold Sunday evening in early 1957, Sarah Dewhurst waits with her father in the parking lot of the Chevron gas station for the dragon he's hired to help on their farm. Now, every author hates this question. I hate this question. I'm sure the authors in the audience hate this question. But, you know, I read that opening that you put up on Instagram ages ago to tease the book. And, you know, this book is basically 1950s America, but with dragons. Where the hell did that idea come from?
It makes sense to me. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's sort of 2 things, really. I'd always wanted to write a book about dragons. Always. There was a very, very good Disney film in the early 80s called Dragon Slayer, long before you were born, darling. And it still has, I think, the greatest screen dragon ever. And it's that dragon doesn't speak, but I like dragons that speak. But I just love, I mean, dragons pop up in so many different cultures. The power of them, the absolute unambiguous magic of them. And so I always wanted to write about dragons, but that's a premise. That's not a plot. It's not a story. So I just waited until something really stuck. And then there's always this other idea that I thought about that, which is it's the idea that Back to the Future is only a comedy if you're a straight white guy. Mm-hmm. That for anybody else, going back to the 50s would really suck.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, actually those 2 ideas kind of go together in my head. I don't know why I thought they went together. And I thought 1950s America but with dragons sounded really cool. Yeah. And I have this long-standing theory that there is no such thing as a realistic novel. All novels are fantasy, even if they look like present day. Yeah. All you have to do is create a universe where your story can plausibly take place, and that's it. So an America or world that has lived with dragons for thousands of years.
So what did you start with? Did you start with that pitch? Did you start with the universe, or did you have a plot that arrived to you, or characters? What was your starting point?
I had the opening.
Mm-hmm.
Really liked that opening, the opening sentence. And I had an idea of a tattooed assassin
Okay.
who tattooed the scripture of his cults all over his body. And I thought, oh, let's see where that goes. And then I just sort of began. And yeah, I really wanted, I'd written 2 books in a row with very constricted sort of plotting, and on purpose. But I really wanted something also freewheeling. I wanted a really wild, wild, wild story. Because I mean, I've said this a lot, but you occasionally hear writers say, oh, I wish I could write a book where nothing happens and plot isn't important. And to a writer, those are writers who cannot plot. And plot is just as important as anything else. It's a tool, it's how you use it. And I wanted a story. I really wanted something to run and race. And I always think that if I can do that, if I can get the machinery working, then I can ignore it because the machinery is working. And then I can just, I can put in all the stuff that I really care about, really love, and hopefully really tender moments, really funny moments, really sad moments. And so yeah, but the two are not mutually exclusive. There's a twist. There's a twist at the end of part 1, obviously, which is what you expected, but there's another twist a couple chapters before the end of part 1 that is my favorite twist I've ever written, and that is purely a product of plot that works. And so that feels so good to write. That feels so good, and that was kind of my goal when I started out. I wanted a lot of energy, and I wanted a lot of just cool shit with dragons, basically.
Yeah. And I have to say that I was actually really surprised when I experienced how propulsive that narrative was, because I picked it up, and I don't know, I think it must be my conditioning of all the canonical texts we read in high school that was set in the 50s. I was expecting, okay, we're on a farm, there's going to be a dragon, it's going to be a slow coming of age novel. And it was the exact opposite of that. Did you find that plot as you were writing it, or do you plot 3 or 4 chapters ahead? Like, what is it? Did this book surprise you as you were writing it?
I mean, I kind of know sort of where I'm heading, but only enough so that I don't feel lost. And I sort of leave enough open spaces so I can create on the way. And that's kind of the combo that works for me. And if you're a writer here who's still working on your first book, there's no right way about this. If you plan it all out, if you don't plan it all out, but you finish a book, either way, you've done it right. So I knew writing long is easy, writing short is hard. And I've written books that are quite long that I look back and go, well, that could have been shorter. Yeah. And so I was really trying to be disciplined and just cut out all the fat and try to be as quick as possible while still hopefully pacing it correctly. So yeah, I don't really know. Plot is kind of, I don't know. I just sort of hope it's there and I leap. And occasionally
do you have an idea of your end point, or is it something that surprises you, or that you arrive to because the machinery works?
Most of it was a surprise, which is terrifying but kind of pleasing. I like to be fruitfully terrified when I write because it makes me pay attention. Yeah, most of it just kind of came as the book came. I just had to trust that it would be there when I reached out for it, which is really scary, but fun. Yeah. And plus, dragons, people. I can't emphasize that enough. Dragons.
Well, how, as someone who loved, a dragon in a film, was there lots of pressure for you to live up to how much you enjoyed, that dragon that you sort of grew up with, or, because you'd waited so long to write a book about dragons? Did that pressure intimidate you in any way?
Nah. I mean, the blank page intimidates me.
Okay.
But I find that really intimidating. I know a lot of authors who talk about how much they hate rewriting. I love rewriting because that means the writing is done. That means I have filled the blank page, and it's the blank page that scares the hell out of me. So no, it's I was as intimidated as I am in front of any blank page, and I was grateful when there was a dragon appearing and I could shape it. I wasn't particularly intimidated about that. No, because it's mine, and it's that thing. It's my world. I'm not going to show it to anybody until it's ready. So no, I got to, and plus it's fun. I got to make all the dragons that I always wanted to make.
So there are different ways that you can interpret dragons. You could have, a small choice like having them speak, not having them speak. Did you experiment with different kinds of dragons, or did you have an idea in your head of these are the kinds of dragons that I want to occupy my world?
No, I mean, I knew they would talk because I like dragons that talk, although Smaug in the endless Hobbit movies, I think talks way too much. So I wanted one who talked how I thought a dragon would talk. I mean, it's kind of like that. I have said this for years that Knife of Never Letting Go came because there was this big serious idea about social media and sharing everything, but then there was also this idea that I hated the way the dogs talked in movies and books.
Yeah.
I thought if a dog would actually talk, what would they actually talk about? And so no, it's that kind of it's that sort of I wanted to write what I hadn't seen.
Yeah.
Which is I think a good reason to write any book, really. So.
Awesome. And now, what I absolutely loved about Burn was how fully realized the world felt. Every few pages, there was a hint of something else going on in the background, and I wanted the book to take all these random details, and I wanted to learn all about these other things, but they were never fully explored. Not that that's a criticism, but that it was like I kept having questions, and I had this curiosity about the world. Is this a world that you see yourself returning to?
I don't know. I mean, there's room. I mean, it's standalone. I'm very, very clear about that. There's room for more, but it's that actually comes from a very specific aim, which is and I'm not saying this to kiss your asses because you're Australian, but there's my favorite writer really in my 20s and 30s is and remains. I love him, Peter Carey. And he does a very specific thing in his books, which is almost all of them, was that he hints at a much larger world beyond the story. I mean, the classic is Oscar and Lucinda, where throughout the story, he refers to her future life as a labor activist and a union organizer. We never see it, never. But that he has made that world bigger fascinates me as a reader, because it feels like there's more. It feels like that this story is just a smaller slice of a bigger world. And I love that. I love that when the universe feels that big and we're only seeing a little corner of it. And the way that you can do it when you write with just little details of referring to most dragons have withdrawn from human society and they live on wastes, which are essentially like reservations. And I never explain why there are wastes or how they came about, but every character would know that because they lived through the history of it. Yeah. And you can refer to it in a way that you know that there's a story, just not on the page. And I love that. I love that when I read, and I really try to do it when I write.
Yeah. Awesome. And now somebody told me something that I found is true, but by all means,
not true. Whatever they said, I deny everything.
No, it's not about you. I mean, it's about the process of writing, where somebody told me once that after you finish a book, you usually learn a lesson about yourself as a writer from that book, and that then informs the way that you approach the next book that you write or the next story, whatever medium you use. Is there anything that you have learned about yourself as a writer from composing Burn?
I mean, I don't know. That sounds kind of Mickey Mouse Club to me. That sounds like, I mean, no. I mean, I want, not really. And I mean, I don't know. That sounds really neat and convenient. That sounds, no. I want every book.
It's my experience.
Second?
I found that it's my experience. Like I'll write a book. I wrote a book that was, say, really intensely personal. And then, after that I was like, you know what, I've learned I don't want to do this for the next one. And that informed the book that I came up with next. I wrote something really plot heavy and I thought, okay, I want to try something different. And it's just, I learned different.
That's not really learning a lesson about yourself. It's more just not wanting to be bored and wanting to stretch and wanting to, like I said, I really, really, really want to be fruitfully terrified every time. And so I want to be different. And because I think if I'm bored, the reader is absolutely going to be bored. So, I mean, and that's not to say there are writers who write in the same vein and they write good books. I mean, that's, which they're welcome to. But I just want to be scared. And I want to try something I haven't. So I want to stretch. But I suppose I just wouldn't frame it as sort of a lesson because that feels kind of moral.
Okay. Well, speaking of disdain for morals and learning lessons, what I love about your books is that they're politically aware, but not so much that they are preachy in any way. They're aware of issues that inform society and that have helped shape society. And you can't go back to the 1950s without having to contend with some of those issues. How do you keep your books from veering into that sort of preachy territory that we sometimes get in, especially books aimed at younger readers?
I do have quite strong opinions on that. Because I've always said that even if I agree with every word of your sermon, I don't want to hear a sermon.
Yeah.
Even if I'm absolutely on the same page, I want a story. However, the phrase, I just want to tell a story, has been used to cover a lot of sins over the years. Because people say, I'm just telling a story. Well, those people have ended up telling the same story over and over again about the same kids who look exactly the same for years and years and years. And so I think you got to be aware that you can't hide from the world. And if your book doesn't look the world, then why should we trust you to tell the truth? And so I really try to, I don't want to write issue books, but I also believe that if I am truly, truly, truly excited by a story, and I can really trust myself on that, then I'm excited about it for a reason. And the reason is going to be sometimes it's cool things like dragons, but it's more often and also people that I care about, or things that really concern me in the world. But it comes from in the core of a story, so that I'm telling the story first that just happens to be informed by everything I care about. I think it's really about the faith of believing that, setting aside what you think a market wants or what a publisher wants or what you should be writing, trusting yourself that what you want to write actually does contain everything that you care about. And I really believe that's true. Yeah. So like, for example, Sarah Dewhurst is mixed race, biracial. 6 of my 8 nieces, I have a hugely multiracial family, and 6 of my 8 nieces and nephews are multiracial. And of the 2 that are white, 1 is trans. So it's my conservative Christian evangelical Republican family are, they're learning a lot of lessons. When I was researching the book, I knew that I wanted characters that looked like my niece, for example, like Sarah. And I researched the book, it's set in my home state of Washington. She's in the northwest of the United States. And my home state repealed the laws against interracial marriage in the late 1800s. Now that means obviously that there were interracial relationships before then, so that there was a demand to repeal the law in the late 1800s, which is 50 years before the neighboring states. And so I wonder, well, where are those people? Where are those people in fiction? Where are they in the 1950s that we don't see on Happy Days? Yeah, that kind of thing. And I find that interesting as a storyteller, because it's fresh and it's new, and it's who were they and what were their lives like? What would my niece's life have been like had she been a teenager in 1957? Yeah. When I was in college, I worked at the university library, and I worked with a woman who had been born in an internment camp in the United States. And Japanese Americans were interred in World War II for up to 2 or 3 years. It's a chapter of American history that hardly anyone talks about. Taken from their homes, American citizens, people born in America, just happened to be Japanese American, placed into camps, actual prison camps. And she had been born in a prison camp. And then, returned to Los Angeles after the war. And she would tell me about being a teenager in the 50s. And she and all of her girlfriends from high school would go down to all the movie studios, and they would wait outside to meet movie stars, particularly Elvis. She wanted to meet Elvis, and she met Elvis a lot. She had lots of Elvis autographs. And I thought, when we see stories about the 50s, we do not see this happy Japanese American teenage girl. We never see it. And why not? And that's interesting to me. So in the book, Sarah, the only other non-white student is Jason, who was born in an internment camp, which I also found out that this fictional town that I set it in is sort of where the area I grew up in, Washington, where we have the state fair. And it's the big state fair for the surrounding states. And it turns out that state fair grounds was an internment camp in World War II. And I had never been taught that, and no one had ever told it to me. So these things I find interesting not just morally, but I do find them interesting morally, but I also find them interesting because I don't hear about them and nobody talks about them. And I didn't get taught about them in the way that I feel that I should have. And so it makes the story richer. So these are things that I'm interested in, and they become things that I'm concerned about, and they become fuel for a story. And hopefully I do them justice, and hopefully I fully imagine them, and hopefully I do my research and so on. And so it becomes a fact of life that they've lived with. They're not a walking banner of historical importance. They're a person that this has happened to. That's a very long way to answer that question, but I suppose just trust yourself, because the stuff you care about is going to show up in a story you really want to tell. I really, really believe that, and I think that's the way to avoid preaching. It's quite interesting because when I started, when I grew up, YA that did exist was actually quite full of lessons, kind of conservative lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Be nice to your parents, or your best. The bully is really your best friend. Fuck off, no, he isn't. And so a lot of current YA is a reaction against that.
Yeah.
And so now there is a kind of switch to the other side where there are lots of lessons coming, very well intentioned, and things that I absolutely believe in, but they're still kind of lessons. And I don't want to read a lesson. I want to read a story with a character who, as a teenager, liked other boys like I did, but maybe he's doing something more than talking about how hard it is to like other boys. That's an important part of the story, but it's not all of who he is. That's who I wanted to read and who I want to write. Blah, 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 blah. This is my sixth Zoom of the day of various kinds. So I am just on a roll, and I will not stop until somebody hits me with a stick.
No, excellent. Well, look, we've had a lot of people come in during that 20-minute sermon you just gave us. So I just wanted to remind everyone that the chat is open. If you want to ask a question, let me know. I'll be watching that. Or if you don't want to unmute your mic and ask the question yourself, I'm happy to ask it for you. I would much rather hear you asking questions than just deal with the boring standard questions that I've got. So please feel bold. Don't be afraid to ask something. Patrick is here for the next 35 minutes to chat. But I thought we'd move on from Burn because you have written so many books that are so beloved by lots of people. And, when I first interviewed you, it was to celebrate the release of Release, which was a very different reading experience to Burn, which is in itself a very different reading experience from your previous book, And the Ocean Was Our Sky, which was a Moby Dick retelling from the perspective of the whale. What should readers come to expect from a Patrick Ness novel, or at least, what makes a Patrick Ness novel a Patrick Ness novel? Or is it just that Patrick wrote it and that's it?
Not a clue. No idea.
Not a clue? No idea?
My publishers are very patient because I just keep turning in stuff that's different from the thing before, which makes it hard to sell. But I think complacency is creative death. And sadly, this summer has quite a few of titles where you feel like, oh, did we really need 600 pages from Edward's point of view? Did we? Really? Why the hell would you choose him over the other guy anyway? Really, if Taylor Lautner is standing there with all that musk, why would you ever choose Robert Pattinson? He looks like he's unwashed. My God, you wouldn't. Yeah, see, there you go, Team Jacob. You look at Edward and you think, my God, there is something horrible hiding under that foreskin. I don't want to know what it is. So, yeah. Anyway, I don't think we need those books. I understand why they sell. And I understand why people might write them, and and I understand why fans love them. But I would hate myself in that experience. That wouldn't be enjoyable. I've tried. I've had times when I've tried to not repeat myself, but expand something from the past, and I think it's not enough. It's not scary enough, and that doesn't make me noble. That's just my temperament, maybe. I got successful quite late
Mhm.
I mean, my books didn't sell until I was nearly 40.
Mhm.
I just dress really immaturely. It's so I'm yeah. So that's why I look boyish. But so I feel like I've got to cram in all my experiences in a shorter window,
Mhm.
and so I really want to try different stuff, and I really want to lots of different things I want to do, and so time is now to do them, not just to repeat myself or not to write yet another prequel. I mean, does anybody really want to know the story of President What's His Name? I mean, do you? I mean, were you just sitting there thinking, God, I really wish I knew what this villain was like as a boy?
Mhm.
Well, I mean, okay, great, enjoy it, but it's just not for me. It's not for me.
And now Sienna has flagged that she has a question about burn. So I want to get to that. Sienna, if you want to type it into the chat or ideally unmute your microphone and ask it.
And then Holly has a question as well. So.
Yes.
Oh, you see, good. She says, no
Okay,
way I
so
will
Sienna
type.
is typing. While she's typing, we have a question from Holly, which is, hi, Patrick. I was wondering if, given that your novels don't all fit in the same mold, have you ever had trouble with publishers wanting you to stick to one type of story?
Not really, because I mean, there's an important thing I think in how you present yourself as a writer, and I really this is advice I would give to everyone, which is that don't ask permission. Your job is then to convince them that you've made the right decision. But I have never once asked my publishers what they thought I should write next. I have only said, this is what I've written next. And my job is then to convince them that it's worth it, that their investment in me is worth it, and that that I've done something that hopefully they can sell. But that starts the conversation in a different place. It's like when I meet writers all the time who tell me, oh, my publisher didn't like my title. I'm like, why did you give them the option of not liking your title? I never say I think the title is this. I always say it's called blank. That's what I say, and not in a horrible, aggressive way. Just it makes the conversation start from a different place.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't take edits or that I don't listen to questions. God knows I definitely do. I have really smart editors. They ask me really smart stuff that I hadn't noticed or that that do make the book absolutely better. It's not that. It's merely saying this is the next book, rather than saying I'm thinking that this might be the next book. What do you think? And it's just a way to have the conversation. So not really. They've never really given me. I was also lucky that the trilogy did well, so that's how I started.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not pretending that I'm some magnificent sweetly assertive thing who always gets his way. No. But I mean, it's just a way of presenting. I think it's a way of presenting yourself. And I just always recommend ask for less permission because you don't need it. The writer gives themselves permission. And then your confidence, you then take it upon yourself to prove that you're right. And that's a heavy burden. But I think that is your burden. It's a preferable burden than arguing with the publisher about what you should be doing, is my opinion. Maybe it's a lot of hot air. I don't know.
All right. And now we have a question from Sienna. So with Burn, it was only dragon magic. Why this choice? Why no other magic? I think I struggled with this as a reader, as I was like, how is there no other magic? I also want, okay, so I won't read that next part. And she also stressed that she enjoyed the book too and can't wait to read your other works.
Why no other magic? Well, I mean, it's my world. You're just reading it. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. Just because there is an explanation. By the end of the book, you get a full explanation of why dragons exist here, and it's a particular reason and it's a particular way. And so I don't know. I think that question is answered there. I mean, I think that's interesting, but just that's the rules of physics for this world. That's just how it goes. I mean, there's a line in The Rest of Us Just Live Here where he's talking to his friend and. She says, we're friends in every universe. And he says, even in the universes where I'm Beyonce. And she says, in some universes, we're all Beyonce. And it just happens in this universe, dragons are the only magic. So yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. That would never have occurred to me. I think that's really interesting questions. Yeah. So my answer is effectively, I don't know, but it's my book. So if you want more magic, then write your own book.
All right, we have Jason up next to unmute and ask his question. Hi, Jason.
Hey there. I just wanted to, I've recently met this gentleman who's an author as well, and it's kind of my first experience with seeing kind of the process of writing a book. And it was really interesting, and I wanted to ask you, when telling a story, when putting so much of yourself into a story, like you do, and you receive maybe some critiques or some negative feedback or whatever it is, what's something that you wish people, like readers, knew about the world of writing or the process of writing and creating a book like this that you feel like they're missing when it comes to that negative feedback?
Oh, fuck them. I mean, who cares about negative feedback if you don't agree with it? Honestly, I mean, it's you gotta. The writing is that I'm sorry for swearing. I do apologize. You know, the only time I've gotten in trouble the only time I've ever gotten in trouble for bad language, it's happened twice in sort of 12 years of doing YA events. And once was in rural Illinois, and the other was at the Sydney Writers Festival with Will Kostakis hosting.
Thanks for that. That was really fun.
Yeah. Oh, I was so mad. I was outraged when she said she wanted me to tone down. I'm like, how dare you? Yes. Anyway, you really have to start only hearing the criticism that you know is true. I mean, some of that is painful, but the rest, you know, I mean, the rest you really kind of have to find some way for it to wash off you. It's hard, you know, but I mean, there's a sort of ongoing joke among writers that there are only two kinds of reviews: one where they love the book and one where they didn't understand it. You know, so it's a kind of a way of, you know, protecting yourself. And, you know, I work so hard on the books, really, really hard. I invest a lot of myself into them. And by the end, I know how I feel about them. And I've gone through my editorial process and so on. And I know what I think works in them, and I know what cracks I've papered over. And I think it's like raising a kid. You know what's great about them. You know when they're stinky, but you love them. And so in a way, by that point in the book, it matters a lot less what other people think, because I know how I feel about it. Yeah. I know what I would do next time. And I know, I see a dog. Christy has a dog. So in that way, good reviews are nice, but bad reviews hurt a lot less because of that, because I think I know. I mean, I wrote my first adult novel in 10 years in 2017, which was The Crane Wife. And the Guardian newspaper in the UK gave it to Ursula Le Guin to review. She hated it. I mean, she did not like it at all. But there was one complimentary sentence, so we took that complimentary sentence and put it on the book, so it looks like Ursula Le Guin really loved the book. So but I was so dreading that, because they warned me ahead of time. They said it's not the kindest review, and I was dreading it. And I was actually in Budapest on vacation when it came out, and I read it on my phone, and I kind of thought, oh, well, that's actually okay. I mean, so what? So what? She didn't understand it, but I mean, it kind of washed off, and I just kind of thought, Ursula Le Guin read my book. That's really cool, And so it's really, to me, it's about having a relationship with the book that is personal to me, and so it kind of, so when people praise it, it's great, it's nice, but I'm still aware of the flaws. And when people don't like it, fine, but I'm still aware of what's good about it. So I think it's that you gotta have a really tough skin while still remaining open to every feeling. So it's a hard combination to be a writer, but yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. But you get there, you develop it, you get there. Good luck.
I remember I got a review about 5 years ago, and someone wrote about halfway through, just, it is very clear that Will wants to have sex with his mum. And so after that, I have just complete immunity to whatever a reviewer throws at me. And they got that wrong.
Well, I mean, this is true on Amazon, which never read your Amazon reviews. But for The Knife of Never Letting Go, one woman, for the Chaos Walking trilogy, one woman reviewed all three. And she gave the first one 1 star. And she gave the second one 1 star. And she gave the third one 1 star. And all I could think of was, you bought all three. So, you know, who's the fool here? I got my royalties.
I picked this up knowing it's a YA novel. I don't like YA novels and I don't like YA fantasy, and this is YA fantasy, and it was exactly as bad as I thought it would be because I don't like this 1 star. And it's like,
or this was so brilliant, I loved it, but it came 2 days late, 1 star. It's fine. Anyway,
all right,
sorry.
I have a question from Emily.
Hi.
Hi there.
My question is, you've talked a bit about like how your some of your influences like wanting to reflect the people in your family and that sort of thing in your books. Are there any characters that that there's a lot of you individually in, or are they all sort of drawn from everywhere?
I now see that someone is watching with their children, and I am absolutely horrified by the things that I've said previously and do terribly apologize. She says it's fine. Okay, good. I'll carry on. So, basing characters on people. Well, I mean, it's one you really shouldn't because they sue. But mostly it's not really. Mostly I want to take little bits and little things about people I know and things about myself. And so 1 or 2 characteristics, and then you mix it up with other things and you fabricate things. So yeah, I sort of have and this is just my taste, I'm not trying to dictate to anybody else, but I have a real gut distaste for autofiction, like Karl Ove Knausgaard or Rachel Cusk, where it really does seem like they're writing every experience they've ever had, just that. And that's not for me. That is really not, I don't regard that as satisfying, and I don't regard that as particularly interesting. And I know lots of people love it, so fine. But just for me, that close observation of your own life, why not write a memoir? You know, you can still be as beautiful in prose in a memoir, of course, as any sort of fiction. But if you're going to imagine something, why not really go whole hog? I mean, when I published 2 books that hardly sold at all when I sold the trilogy, and I thought, you know, I may never get another chance at this, so what the hell, why not be as ambitious as absolutely possible and really just go whole hog and say, I'm going to write this giant trilogy and this is what's going to happen in it. And so, I don't know, I would feel like just the replication of one person, I'd feel it a little insulting to that person, but I'd also feel slightly reductive to an imaginative universe. Not that I'm talking about fantasy versus reality, because again, I don't believe in realistic fiction, but I just, suit the character for what they need and who they are. Let them grow and be their own thing rather than just somebody you know. But but lots of people like that, you know, lots of people, I have no idea why people read Karl Ove Knausgaard. I have absolutely no idea what they're getting from that. But they do, so what do I know? That's just my opinion.
And now we have a question from Gareth. How tough was it writing A Monster Calls, given that it was the kernel of someone else's unfinished story? It has a powerful message, but it's not preachy. How much of it was handed to you that you had to stay true to? It doesn't preach at you, but had a powerful message. How did you manage that while staying true to the original idea?
Well, the original idea, Siobhan was great. Siobhan Dowd, you should read her books. They're wonderful, really, really unsentimental and smart. And this was going to be her 5th book, but as you probably know, she died of breast cancer before she could finish this one, before she could really start. So she had about 1,000 words of first chapter, and she had an structural idea about the monster telling stories. And so that was there, and that was it. That was kind of the kernel. But in the least egomaniacal sounding way, I said no at first, and I said no for a particular reason, which is that I don't think a book that is a tribute is a good book. it's a tribute. It's not a book. And I don't think she was such a good writer. That's not what she would have done. She would have let the story grow and change and become something. And I said, I can't do this unless I have that freedom. And it's not sort of, again, it's not saying my way or the highway. It's just saying the story will suffocate if that's not what happens. And so I didn't use any of her prose because I didn't want to feel like I was trying to copy her. What I did is thematically what I believe she would have done, which is let the story go where it needs to go, like I said. I read the opening chapter, and I looked at her structural idea, and I thought this sounds really interesting. But what made me write it is that I then got an idea of Connor, the main protagonist, at some point in the story coming out of maybe a dream or something to discover he'd destroyed his grandmother's living room. And I thought, that's it. That feels to me like the kernel of the story, all of the anger there, all of the transgression of the action. And I thought, boy, there's real power there. And that's how you know an idea is a good idea, was when other ideas start sticking to it. So she had this original idea, and other ideas started sticking to it. And I thought there might be something here. And I said, so I have to have the freedom to follow it where it goes. And they said yes. And so that's kind of where it happened. And I was so concerned about, I so wanted to avoid beautiful crying, a single glycerin tear kind of thing. I so wanted to avoid that. I really hate sentimental books. As much as I hate pointlessly cruel books, because I think pointless cruelty is just as contrived as sentimentality. It's like that Hanya Nagira book, A Little Life, which is all about suffering and all about ostentatious suffering. And all I could think was, anyone who glorifies suffering has never suffered. Suffering is not glorious. It's suffering. That's why it's called suffering. So I really didn't want sentimentality. God, I'm in such a bad mood about other writers this call. I'm so sorry. I'm usually much more chipper. Read Edward's story if you want to. Go for it. Love it. Tell him to wash his willy. I really, really wanted Monster Calls to feel true, not storybook true, not after school special true, not a very special YA novel true, because I thought anything else was a disservice to any kid who's been through this. And I was I felt so lied to by books when I was a kid. And that's what I really wanted to avoid. And I wanted to honor the toughness that kids have and how hard it can be to be a kid. Because it can be really, really hard. And for a kid not to buckle under some of the things that they have to face is unbelievably heroic. And I thought that anything that softened it or made it easy was a betrayal. And so I just kept at it, and I kept pushing and pushing and pushing. Because otherwise, the catharsis means nothing. If it's a fake catharsis, it's not a catharsis. And so that moment where he can let her go, that's everything. That's what he has to do. And to me, the whole book is, there's one sentence where when he's in the hospital room at the end and the monster is there and he turns to the monster and asks if he'll stay. And you kind of realize that's all he really wanted all along. He just didn't want to have to face this alone, which is what he had been doing, the whole time, because nobody would tell him the truth. Yeah. And that to me is the whole thing. And, but to get there, you cannot lie about the darkness. If you want people to believe you about the light, then you cannot lie about the darkness. So that's why I just kept pressing it. Hopefully that answers your question.
And staying on a Monster Calls, you also penned the screenplay for the film. So you weren't beholden to the original prose or the original kernel of the idea that you started with, but when it came to adapting it for the screen, did you feel precious about the novel itself, or how did you approach that?
Well, I felt precious about what I thought might be changed. That's what I was worried about. Not that I am some huge expert on it all, but I had a lot of meetings about it, and not everyone, lots of people were great. A few people were suggesting ways to soften it. And I thought, that feels like a betrayal. So I thought, well, why don't I write the script on spec just to start the conversation. You know, I'm not a filmmaker. There's lots I don't know. There's lots I'm going to have to learn. But at least I can lay down what I think is important, and maybe somebody will respond to that. I was really lucky in that somebody did. And then we started talking. We developed it and made it into a film. It's not a book. You know, you've got to have there have to be changes. And my sort of philosophy, the comfort that I gave myself is that the book remains. You know, the book still exists. The movie doesn't cancel the book. The movie is a remix of the book, and I'll do my best to make it the best remix I can. But you know, it doesn't cancel the book, which is why it came out at the same time as the Kate McKinnon, Melissa McCarthy Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And all of the whiny man babies were going on about it. You know, ruins Ghostbusters. I'm like, dude, if you want to talk about a movie that ruins the original Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters 2 is a terrible, terrible movie. And it didn't cancel Ghostbusters, and this isn't going to cancel Ghostbusters, so stop crying. But that's kind of my thing. The book isn't canceled. I'll do my best. I really want the movie to be good, but I'm okay with changes. I'm really okay with it.
And now I've read that you are, and correct me if I'm wrong, working on an adaptation of Lord of the Flies at the moment. Is that right?
Sam?
Is it something that you're willing to talk about, or should I just pretend?
Yeah, I mean, no, it's all good. I mean, no, it was announced and all that. So I'm writing a new version of Lord of the Flies for Luca Guadagnino, who directed Call Me By Your Name at Suspiria. And so, yeah, that's what I'm spending most of my days doing now. Torturing and killing teenage boys on an island. Yeah, feeding them to sharks and hucking them out of planes and all that. Yeah, it's great for a pandemic. Really great. Yeah. So
the process to adapting somebody else's work different to the way that you adapt your own, or same principles apply?
Same principles. I mean, I've adapted other things, and what I've tried to do is I refer to the source material a lot in the first draft, and then after that, I really don't, because the movie has to stand on its own merits.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so it's. I mean, I'm not going to cancel the book of Lord of the Flies by writing an absolutely terrible movie. I think hopefully it'll be pretty good. No, I mean, I'll tell the story in my way. I've always said that a book is not a song. A book is the performance of a song. So pick a good song, but people are going to pay to hear how you sing it. Yeah. So this is how I would sing Lord of the Flies. Okay. And you know, and Burn is about how I sing dragons. And you will sing that same story differently, and that's why we tell stories, to hear how people have sung their song. So yeah, this is just how I would sing Lord of the Flies, is how I'll say that. I'm not actually going to sing, because that would be terrible for everyone.
I really love that. All right, Michael, are you happy to ask your question?
Yeah, totally. First off, nice haircut.
Thank you.
You once told me that all men in Australia have awful haircuts, so I thought I should point out that yours is on point.
I did. Well, I mean, we were talking about it, and it was like lots of little tiny man buns, or you know. Yeah, I think actually Tim Witten is the one who points that out, because Tim Witten really does have a terrible haircut, but I think he's aware of it, and I think he talks about your country.
My question was.
It's all great. It's all great.
Yeah.
Love your country. Love it.
My question was around research. Using Burn or any of your novels that you'd like, what's your research process? How much do you do before starting? And do you ever stop halfway through to do more? Yeah. I once saw Peter Carey. I've seen Peter Carey a number of times in events, and somebody once asked him this exact question about how much research he did, and his answer was more than I'd like, but less than I should. And I thought, that's actually kind of it. You know, you do as little as you can possibly get away with, but you have to do some, because it has to be true. It has to be right. A reader cannot be kicked out of the book because you got a fact wrong. So I tend to research what I need on the day I need it. Or if I get an idea, I'll do it right then, just because I want to know enough facts to be convincing. Burn, the central to Burn is the launch of Sputnik, which happened in 1957. I have moved it up about 10 months
And I'm okay with that because, you know, it's a fictional universe of a book and it's very clear that there are dragons there. But I wanted to get everything else right about Sputnik. And so just as and when I need it, because you really, if you lose a reader that way, that is a terrible way to lose a reader. That is just so angry at yourself for a stupid mistake. So yeah, I do as little as I can get away with, but that still ends up being quite a lot. Yeah. So, but writers will use any excuse not to start, and they'll use any excuse not to write. So, you know, research all you want, but you still got to write the book.
Would you say that most of your research focuses on historical facts and times and that kind of thing, or does research extend to other things such as personality types or you know, whatever?
I mean, definitely. I mean, history, obviously, but also, like, I had an oncologist read A Monster Calls just to make sure that I had everything right. Annie has asked, I love the interactions with the psychiatrist and the rest of us just live here. What was your intention in portraying that? I mean, that, you know, I've talked to counselors, I've talked to psychiatrists. A lot of it is based on my own thing, but it's also wanting to get the facts of mental illness correct, wanting to get the facts of treatment correct. His sister has recovered from anorexia, and the rest of us just live here, which, by the way, most anorexics do recover from anorexia. That was a fact that never quite gets taught. It's a terrible, traumatic problem, but there is hope for most anorexics. You know, I mean, it is something conquerable. And that was an interesting thing to learn in research. And so what does then 5 years after anorexia look like? What does it accurately look like? And can it, you know, and how does it form you as a person? So that's the kind of stuff I want to read and want to know so that I get it right, so that I'm not insulting someone who's been through it. But also just because it's interesting to me. And I never knew that. I never knew those kinds of things, and how people talk about something serious 5 years after, 10 years after. So it's all kinds of little things where I just don't want to look like a jerk. You know, I want it to be true in the right way. So yeah, it's all kinds of little things. I mean, I'm about 80 pages from the end of the Wolf Hall trilogy, which I think are brilliant. I think Hilary Mantel is just amazing. I don't ever see myself writing that kind of thing. But her synthesis of history plus her fictive imagination are astounding. But it's not something that I don't think I could do. I don't think I could do it. You know, it's hard enough to get the 50s looking right. You know, Tudor England would like, geez. So yeah, that's what I would say. Just don't let it stop you. Don't let it hog tie you. I always used to say, it's kind of glib, but I always just say it doesn't have to be true. It just has to be convincing. And in a way, that's accurate. But you don't want to lose a reader for a stupid reason. I once told an actor that he had to wear underwear under his jeans because I said, I don't want to have to cut the scene for a really stupid reason. Yeah, I said, this is not a Me Too thing. You just got to wear underpants. Yeah. So. Oh, and the psychiatrist question. What was your intention of portraying that? There's a chapter in The Rest of Us Just Live Here, which is just dialogue, and it's just between Mikey and his psychiatrist. And part of it is just, I had terrible OCD as a kid, and I had terrible anxiety, which is OCD is a manifestation of anxiety. And that was really purely something I would have wanted to hear when I was 16 or 17, because I was wildly untreated. You know, I really needed some help when I was a teenager and didn't get it. So this was just a way of taking the inflammation out of the terror, of the shame of it. So that's really what it was. It was just trying to say, you can speak these things out loud and not die from it. And somebody will understand you, and somebody will be able to explain to you why you are not wrong. There is just, you know, you've got a little affliction that needs to be addressed, but it doesn't make you a bad person or incorrect or unheroic or less than. So it's really that. It's the things that I really wanted to hear as a kid that I should have heard. You know, I survived, but that's where that came from. I get asked about that chapter a lot, actually. So yeah, it's nice.
Well, we've actually come to the end of our hour with Patrick Ness.
And I'm going to leave, so see you guys later. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yeah, Patrick.
Bye.